I took a shower washing every body part with actual soap, including all my major crevices, including in between my toes and in my belly button, which I never did before but sort of enjoyed. I washed my hair with the Don't Formula shampoo and used cream rinse for that Just Wash shine. I can't seem to find my toothbrush, so I'll pick one up when I go out today. Other than that, I'm in good shape.
Welcome to Pretty and Podcast. For this episode, I'm going to do things a little differently. It's been a while since I've recorded a full episode, and as the holidays are upon us, I've been revisiting one of my favorite John Hughes franchises, Home Alone. This year I sat down to not only the first two Home Alone movies, but also all of the sequels, the Mockbusters, and Home Alone-inspired parodies that I could find. And rather than delving into the development or the film history of the franchise, instead, consider this a viewing guide of sorts. I'll give a quick rundown on each of the films and whether it's worth your time. Starting with the first two films, Home Alone and Home Alone 2: Lost in New York. Home Alone is a 1990 comedy film directed by Chris Columbus, written by John Hughes, scored by John Williams, and starring Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern, John Hurd, Catherine O'Hara, and the late John Candy. It's an incredibly impressive cast. It's also the highest-grossing Christmas movie of all time, and one of the highest-grossing comedies of all time, and in my opinion, a near-perfect film. The premise is simple. Through a rather convoluted series of events, 8-year-old Kevin McAllister, played by Macaulay Culkin, is accidentally left home in a Chicago suburb over the Christmas holidays, and is forced to protect his home from two burglars, the Wet Bandits, as played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern. The B-story of the film is his family, especially his mother, attempting to return home to Chicago. The second film happens a year later. The Wet Bandits rechristen themselves as the Sticky Bandits, and they've escaped prison and coincidentally crossed paths with Kevin, who accidentally got on the wrong plane and instead of spending Christmas in Miami with his family, ends up again alone. But this time in New York City. In both films, Kevin uses his smarts and surroundings to fend off the bumbling bandits, using a series of clever traps and distractions. Macaulay Culkin is a lot of the reason the first two films work so well. Culkin's performance as Kevin is spot on. He's smug and a bit annoying, but he's also extremely charming. And he's a kid that means well. His long expositional scenes tend to be believable. See the iconic aftershave scene that I played at the opening of this episode. The first two films' stunt sequences perfectly translate to the screen thanks to the directorial skills of Chris Columbus. At this point in Columbus's career, he'd written both Gremlins, another Christmas classic, and Goonies, and directed 1987's Adventures in Babysitting. He clearly loves working with kids and found kinship with John Hughes' love of The Three Stooges and Keystone Cops. Part of the reason that the sequences work so well is that though the setup is simple, the stunts and pratfall sequences are complex and unexpected. Columbus instinctively knows when to hold in a moment and when to flash past it. Having Academy Award-winning Joe Pesci and the exceptional Daniel Stern to play the villains only helps. They are as cruel as they are stupid. Like a live-action Yosemite Sam or Wile E. Coyote. And finally, John Williams' score. Williams was a last-minute replacement for the film, and likely wouldn't have happened but for Columbus's connection to Spielberg, thanks to Gremlins. As best I can tell, Home Alone and Lost in New York are Williams' only two scores set at Christmas, and the score Williams created is, in every way, as iconic as the ones he created for Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Superman. The song Somewhere in My Memory took home the Academy Award for Best Original Song that year. The first two films in the series set the standard for Home Alone and its subsequent films, and for most people, there's no reason to see another version of Home Alone. Those first two films pretty much encapsulate the whole thing. But if you do, here's where to start. The simply titled Home Alone 3 from 1997. Actually, here's where not to start. Home Alone 3 seems like the logical place, as it was penned by the series creator John Hughes and directed by the film's original editor, Raja Gosnell, in his directorial debut. Initially, the original director, Chris Columbus, suggested filming a third sequel, alongside or immediately after filming Home Alone 2, to assure that Macaulay would look young enough to play the part. However, the studio got cold feet, and despite an impressive box office, it took a full 5 years before another Home Alone was made. It's unlikely that the script that got made was the one that Columbus would have shot. Hughes was a fast writer, and by 1997, when this film was made, he'd largely withdrawn from the day-to-day involvement of his scripts or movies. And as much as 50% of the script could have been rewritten without having to change the script's attribution. That's not to say that Hughes isn't responsible for the mess that was Home Alone 3, and I firmly feel that it was Columbus's directorial skills and writing choices that led to the brilliance of the first two films. But it had been 5 years. Culkin was now 15 and retired from acting, so this time there's no Kevin McAllister. In fact, there's no McAllisters at all, which is somewhat disappointing. The previous film set up a perfect segue to move the franchise over to Kevin's cousin, Fuller, played by Macaulay Culkin's real-life younger brother, Kieran. But the studio or Hughes went another way. Instead, we get an 8-year-old named Alex Pruitt, played by Alex D. Linz. The plot is incredibly convoluted, so I'm paraphrasing from the also muddled Wikipedia page. Here's the setup. 4 possibly Russian hitmen working for a North Korean terrorist organization have stolen a $10 million missile cloaking computer chip. The thieves put it inside a remote-controlled car to sneak it past security at San Francisco International Airport. However, a luggage mix-up occurs and a woman named Mrs. Hess inadvertently takes the thieves' bag, containing the remote-controlled car, to her home in Chicago. The 4 thieves track Mrs. Hess to Chicago and systematically search every house in the neighborhood to find the chip. Meanwhile, Hess gives 8-year-old Alex Pruitt the same remote-control car in lieu of payment for shoveling snow. When an itchy Alex returns home after shoveling the walk, he removes his shirt to discover he has chickenpox and must stay home from school. I'll save some time here and simply say that if there's one film to be avoided in this franchise, it's this one. First, one needs to believe that the team of 4 professional and capable hitmen, or thieves depending on the reading, are unable to take down an 8-year-old. Secondly, they seem unwilling to kill him despite the fact that they need the chip for a weapon. And the spies, they don't do the most obvious thing, simply knock on Mrs. Hess's door. Had they shown up at Mrs. Hess's door with the bread she bought, this whole movie could have been avoided. When the thieves do narrow down the chip's location to Alex's house, there's also no plan. In the first 2 films, Kevin carefully maps out a battle plan and Operation Ho 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 in crayon-drawn maps. In this film, the closest Alex gets to a plan is a 2-second shot of a neighbor's, specifically Jimmy Alcott's house, a kid who does not appear in the film. I'll put a screenshot of that on the website. Most of the movie is Alex driving a remote-controlled car and recruiting his sentient white rat and a talking parrot to help him with his traps that are nowhere near as complex or dangerous as the previous films. In previous films, Columbus lays out the elements of his traps like small Chekhov's guns. If we see it in the film, it gets used in the later acts. For this film, Alex simply has everything at hand as he needs it, whether it's a toy gun and black spray paint, or teaching a parrot complicated dialogue to answer the phone with. It's also not much of a Christmas movie. School hasn't let out for the year, and I'm not even sure they show a Christmas tree. Home Alone 3 does have one point of interest. A performance by a young Scarlett Johansson in an early role as Molly Pruitt, Alex's older sister. So that's something. Home Alone 3 was also nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Remake or Sequel. It lost the award that year to Speed 2 Cruise Control, which took place on a cruise ship. Anyway, moving on. To Home Alone, Taking Back the House, made in 2002. From Wikipedia again. The fourth installment was directed by Rod Daniel and premiered as a television film on ABC on November 3, 2002. This film returns to the original's main character, Kevin, played by Mike Weinberg, and one of the two sticky bandits, Marv, played by French Stewart. Kevin's parents have divorced and he lives with his mother. After an argument with his family, Kevin decides to spend Christmas with his father and very rich girlfriend Natalie, but finds himself having to deal with his old nemesis Marv and his new sidekick's wife, Vera, played by Missy Pyle, who replaces Harry since he and Marv put their partnership to an end. From the Home Alone Wiki. Home Alone's fourth installment was originally meant to be a pilot for a television series. In the first episode of the TV show, Marv was to return as the main antagonist along with Vera to rob the McAllister household to fulfill a goal he and Harry set out to do in the first movie. The producers had also intended for new child characters to be featured with new antagonists in a children-created neighborhood watch program in which they entrapped and captured potential villains trying to rob houses. This installment of the series is problematic for a few reasons. First, the McAllister parents' separation seems based on nothing from the previous two films, and even an 8-year-old can tell by the end of the movie that the family will be back together. Two of Kevin's siblings from previous movies, Linny and Jeff, just simply don't exist. And Natalie, his new stepmother, or new potential stepmother, her worst quality is that she doesn't watch movies more than once. She's not really evil. Setting the story in a rich neighborhood makes sense for an ongoing series, but I'm not sure that was the plan, since the couple, sorry for the spoiler, doesn't stay together by the end. And speaking of Natalie's house, it's a technological marvel. Everyone uses remote controls to operate every appliance and door in the house, but no one seems to have a cell phone. Maybe it's just because it's been 15 years and I still open doors manually, but the reliance on gadgetry in this film versus using Kevin's innate cunning to set the traps, it ultimately hurts it. That said, there are performances in this film that are worth watching. Eric Avar, who you may know as Kazuf in Stargate, I probably said that wrong, does a great turn as Mr. Prescott, Natalie's butler. But it's French Stewart and Missy Pyle as Marv and Vera that make this movie almost worth watching. French Stewart, who's best known as Harry Solomon in Third Rock from the Sun, is the perfect hybrid of Daniel Stern and Joe Pesci's performance from the original films, and Missy Pyle, who played Laliari in Galaxy Quest, great movie, is also exceptionally funny in her role. Pyle and Stewart share great chemistry, and it's about the only thing worth returning to the film for. One critic, which was possibly Clint Morris at Movie Hole, had this to say: I don't get it. This movie is brilliant. Granted, I was high while watching it, but it was brilliant. French Stewart he gives a sad and heartbreakingly amazing performance. Again, high. And that brings us to the fifth and final installment of the Home Alone franchise, 2012's Home Alone: The Holiday Heist.
Hey, Finn, press pause for a bit, why don't you, kiddo?
Yet again, I'm going to an edited Wikipedia description. Holiday Heist is the second film after Home Alone 3 not to focus on the McAllister family, and is the first film in the series not to be set in Chicago. Don't forget, Home Alone 2 Lost in New York starts in the McAllister Chicago family home. The Baxter family moved from California to Maine to settle into a new home during the Christmas season. 10-year-old Finn Baxter, played by Christian Martin, and his older sister Alexis, played by Jodelle Ferland, are technophiles who isolate themselves from their parents and the outside world. Finn is always playing his video game, Robo Infantry 3, and Alexis is always on her phone. Encouraged by his dad to socialize, Finn befriends his neighbor Mason, played by Peter DeCuna, who informs him about the legend of a smothered gangster whose ghost haunts the Baxters' new home, leaving Finn paranoid. Meanwhile, a group of thieves consisting of Sinclair, Malcolm McDowell, Jessica, Debbie Mazar, and safecracker Hughes, Eddie Steeples, plan to break in and steal an old, long-lost Edvard Munch painting, The Widow, not a real painting, valued at $85 million. At night, Curtis and Catherine leave for a Christmas party hosted by Catherine's new boss, Mr. Carson, played by Ed Asner, and are trapped at the party by a snowstorm. Finn, while searching for new batteries for his video game controller, accidentally drops one that rolls into the basement, where Finn and Alexis discover a safe and secret room behind it, which houses the painting Sinclair is looking for. Frightened by the portrait, Finn flees and Alexis accidentally triggers a trap, which locks her in. Finn heads out to a hardware store to buy supplies to break out his sister, but is only able to afford string, and stumbles across Sinclair, the villain, who he overhears discussing plans to break into his house. Yet, instead of calling the police, Finn instead sets up numerous booby traps around the house, many derivatives of the earlier installments, including Home Alone 3. If you're able to ignore the fact that Finn doesn't simply call the police, for a family-friendly TV movie, this one's pretty good. And Malcolm McDowell, he's always pretty great. And it's definitely less violent than previous installments, so parents wishing to enjoy Home Alone without having to worry about their kids trying to kill them might find something in this. So, here's my final ranking of the Home Alone official franchise, and it's as follows. The originals sit at the number 1 and number 2 positions, Home Alone and Home Alone Lost in New York, respectively. At number 3, Home Alone Holiday Heist. Derivative, but with a story that mostly makes sense and is mostly in keeping with the spirit of the original film. At number 4, Home Alone Taking Back the House, simply for French Stewart and Missy Pyle's performances. And in last place, Home Alone 3. Someone should make a supercut of Scarlett Johansson's performance, so there's no reason to sit through the rest of it. After seeing 5 official Home Alone movies, I didn't stop there. I figured with the enormous success of Home Alone, it's a movie that's been parodied and riffed on many times in the 25 years since it was made, and I attempted to find and watch all of them, or close to all of them. First up, the YouTube parodies. There's an endless amount of these, clips from Family Guy and recreations, but of the Home Alone parodies, here are 2 of my favorites, and I'll link to them on the show notes.
Are you sure it's okay with your roommates that I'm crashing at your apartment?
Oh, for sure. They love company. Especially my roommate, Kevin. Guy hates being home alone.
Home Alone parody, Kevin Defends the Apartment, made in 2015 by Studio C. This is a short video showing Kevin during his college years with his college roommate. And Kevin, after his roommate leaves him alone in the apartment for maybe an hour, defends the apartment from all intruders, including his current roommates and a couple of characters from the first 2 films, some friends, some neighbors. It's only 3 minutes 22 seconds long, but it's pretty great. And drivers.
Drivers. Let's go.
Episode 1. Just Me in the House by Myself, starring Macaulay Culkin, made in 2015 by Jack DeShell. This one went pretty viral, so you may have seen it already. Macaulay Culkin reprises his role as a roughly 24-year-old PTSD-suffering Kevin McAllister, who is now a driver for an Uber-like service, Drivers. Except it's not his car, it's his wife Anna's car, who did too much blow to drive. It's 5 curse-filled minutes of brilliant revisionist commentary, and you kinda should see it, rather than me describe it. Next up, the Mockbusters are copycat films. Surprisingly, I could only find 2 true copycat films, which took me a little by surprise. I absolutely expected more. First up, Harry Puttar, a comedy of terrors, a Bollywood film made in 2008. Harry Puttar was made after the 4th Home Alone film and led to a lawsuit. Warner Brothers took Mirchi Movies, the makers of the Bollywood film, to court over the film's similarities to its own movie franchise, Harry Potter, and not the film that it actually rips off, Home Alone. Harry Puttar, directed by Rajesh Bajaj and Lucky Kohli, and starring Jackie Shroff, Sarab Shukla, and Sarika. I am going to mangle almost all of these names. What's great is that the film is half Hindi and half English, so it was fairly easy to follow for somebody who only speaks one of the languages. It centers around a 10-year-old boy named Harry Prasad Dahunda, nicknamed Harry Puttar, or Harry's son, who has recently moved from India to somewhere outside of London. Harry is accidentally left home with his cousin Tuk Tuk, played by Swinhi Kara, when his parents go on vacation, and Harry must deal with 2 burglars who fly in from India and attempt to steal a secret formula that Harry's father had created. This film was pretty widely panned, although most of that seems to be a reaction from people who were hoping for a Harry Potter ripoff. And there are some wholly unnecessary and poorly executed animated sequences that seemed like an afterthought, designed to push the film's running time up to over an hour. For obvious reasons, there's no references to Christmas in the film, and the locations subbing in for Britain are in no way indicative of any part of the United Kingdom. However, the addition of Harry's younger cousin Tuk Tuk is pretty adorable. She steals every scene that she's in. And the translation of the plot into an Indian household is done fairly well for the most part. Hari is upset that there's no chicken tikka instead of Kevin's cheese pizza. I appreciate the rhyming. But when the family abandons Harry and Tuk Tuk for the train station, they only take one van, and it's hard to believe they forgot about him. That said, the villains Diesel and Filter are fantastic and cartoonish. Despite its many flaws, fans of Home Alone will probably find plenty to enjoy about this. The multiple references and ripped-off moments are great, especially after a drink or two. And that brings us to our final film, Alone for Christmas, aka Bone Alone, from 2013.
It's December again, my dear friend. I haven't seen you in a little bit. About you I just can't forget all the fun when we were young. We caused some trouble here and there while we were playing truth or dare. Lights all around me flashing red and green. My whole family gathered round the Christmas tree. I don't care about the presents or the food. All I wanna do is be right here with you. I want my very best friend for Christmas, this Christmas. My best friend to the very end for Christmas, this Christmas. I want my best friend, best friend. I want my best friend, best friend. I want my very best friend for Christmas, this Christmas.
This is from The Asylum, the same team that brought the world Sharknado, and it's about a dog left home at the holidays. I'll let the trailer do all the heavy lifting.
Bone, what did you do?
When the Conley family
I'm sorry, but Bone can't come with us to Grandma's house this year.
leaves for the holidays,
I thought it was righty-tighty, lefty-loosey.
It's righty offy, lefty on.
they leave Bone alone.
You're not going to Grandma's?
I'm going to miss the big turkey dinner.
But when intruders arrive,
Get to work.
it's up to Bone
You have to stop them.
Stop them? How?
to save Christmas.
Time to take these guys down.
The Asylum presents
I'm stuck. Dad.
Thank you. Wait till you get a load of my bike.
This dog
I am invincible!
is a tricky one.
My God!
Alone for Christmas.
Cuz, you okay? Darn, Skippy!
Director Joe Lawson was the visual effects supervisor for Sharknado and its many sequels. And this movie is exactly what you'd expect. It has talking dogs. And they look far better than one would expect. There's many homages to Home Alone, but these all have a little bit of a dog slant. Example, instead of the burglar Harry Lime posing as a police officer at the beginning of the original Home Alone, we get our villain's ringleader Jake posing as a postal worker. Dogs, postal workers, great. Jake is played by Jeremy Mascia, and Mascia is fantastic. Why he hasn't been seen in other things is amazing to me. Casting directors, get on that. This guy deserves good things. It's an extremely silly take on Home Alone, but if you were ever hoping to extend the series beyond the original scope of the Home Alone franchise, I would look no further than this film. And if any of the knockoffs deserve a sequel, actually if any of the original Home Alones deserved another sequel, it's this one. I'm all for pitching Bone Alone, Lost in New Jersey as the second film. The Asylum, get in touch. Anyway, that brings us mostly to the end of this special episode on the Home Alone franchise, its Mockbusters and Parodies. But I can't finish up without mentioning one more film that owes a great debt to Home Alone. The 2012 James Bond movie, Skyfall. It clocks in at an impressive 2 hours, 24 minutes, and the bulk of the movie is pure James Bond. But at the 1 hour, 46 minute mark, the film takes a turn, landing them at the titular Skyfall estate. One can almost see Kevin McAllister growing up as Daniel Craig's Bond, and with minimal weaponry, Bond, M, and Kincaid have to set up booby traps to fight a strike team launched by cyber terrorist Raul Silva, played by Javier Bardem. It's like the plot for Home Alone 3 grew up and moved to Britain. There's a fantastic video, Skyfall Meets Home Alone, by 100 DB Productions from 2012, that I'll link to in the show notes that kind of connects the two movies perfectly. And finally, there's also a theory first floated by Jason Concepcion over at Grantland, who asks, did Kevin from Home Alone grow up to be Jigsaw? A deadly serious investigation. It's an article that posits that Kevin became Jigsaw from the Saw horror movie franchise. It's not a theory I buy into, but it makes for a fun read. I'll link to that in the show notes, along with an article where doctors assess the injuries of the first two films, and a few other things from the previous movies that I've talked about. So, to recap. This and every year, enjoy the first two Home Alone films, and if you're hankering for more, I'd have to recommend The Asylum's Alone for Christmas, aka Bone Alone, with Harry Puttar, A Comedy of Terrors, as a close second choice. Pretty in Podcast was written, produced, and performed by 517, which is me. Original theme music is by Brad Davis, and you can look up Pretty in Podcast on Facebook and Twitter, and show notes at prettyinpodcast.com. If you want to encourage more episodes, please leave a rating at iTunes and subscribe. Until next time, I'll leave you with this song from Harry Puttar, which has some amazing English lyrics. And at the very, very end, I put some bonus content that really shouldn't be heard by a younger audience.
Harry Puttar is a dude. He will rock you, dude. Oh yeah, Harry rock you, dude. शक्ल से बच्चे, अक्ल से बाप, खेले कंप्यूटर और लैपटॉप, जिसकी चाहे बैंड बजा दे, हमें न बुद्धू समझो आप. Buddy Puttar is a dude, he will rock you, dude. शक्ल से बच्चे, अक्ल से बाप, खेले कंप्यूटर और लैपटॉप, अरे जिसकी चाहे बैंड बजा दे, हमें न बुद्धू समझो आप. Buddy Puttar is a dude, he will rock you, dude. सबको आंख दिखाता है, भाईगिरी जो करता है, औरों को जो डराता है, वो भी मुझसे डरता है. मेरी गलियों से दुश्मन बच के गुजरता है, जो मुझसे टकराता है वो टूट के यही बिखरता है. Buddy Puttar is a dude, he will rock you, dude. Buddy Puttar is a dude, he will rock you, dude. Come on, boys, let's rock.
Now, if you're listening to the podcast with kids, now is definitely the time to hit the pause button, because I'll be talking about the 2 adult film parodies of the franchise. Adult as in XXX. Of Home Alone. They exist. Beginning with 2012's Home Alone: Return of the Wet Bandits. In this, Kevin, played by Sonny Hicks, is 18 and left alone by his parents simply because he was too lazy to get out of bed. This half-hour parody starts promisingly enough, with a delightful John Williams sound-alike snippet of the score, and it quickly goes downhill from there. After the first few minutes, all attempts to tie this parody to the original franchise are gone. The Wet Bandits, played by Dahlia Sky and Zoe Nixon, break in by finding a key under the doormat. They do at least make the attempt to put the aftershave scene in there, but there's only one trap, a spilled jar of lube in the hallway for the bandits to slip on, who at the time Kevin is absolutely unaware that the burglars are in the house, so Kevin just looks clumsy, not like he's setting a trap. Kevin does tie up the bandits, and the rest of the film is him negotiating their release. Or his release. And one more, Ho Alone, released in 2014.
These guys think they can come in my back door like that? They're gonna have to play by my rules.
We know you're in here. Come out and play.
Yeah, it's just Sandy Claus and his elf.
I'm over here, you f***ing assholes. You guys want a piece of this? Come and get it, big boys.
All right, let's get that stuff. Yeah.
Are you guys thirsty for some more?
Get her! Oh. Oh, fuck.
So, now do you guys give up?
Please don't call the cops.
That depends. I'll be waiting upstairs.
In this, another half-hour video, Dakota Skye takes on the role of Kevin. Her character is unnamed, who's simply left home alone to eat unbranded cereal and watch porn when 2 burglars break in, presumably because they catch her watching porn with them in it. But that's not entirely clear, and it really should be. This one does reference the BB gun scene and the flying paint cans, but again, after a few minutes, the premise is abandoned. Both films seem to just use the premise as clickbait and simply abandon the theme as soon as they are able to. Also, neither film quite escapes the undertone of sexual assault, regardless of how willing each participant seems. There was no real attempt to write around it and have it work. Besides, parodying a film that originally had an 8-year-old as its protagonist is a little unsettling.
That's it. We're done.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. And a Happy New Year.